Yeah, here we go. So, welcome everybody to Figma's Education Early Career Week series focusing on design portfolios. We've heard from you time and time again that one of the biggest barriers facing students and early career designers is creating a strong portfolio that showcases your talent, your personality, and yes, your skills. Yesterday, we talked about foundations of 2 days ago, we talked about the foundations of a good design portfolio. And we looked at some examples to see some of those best practices in action. Yesterday was day one of the portfolio sessions, and we're going to build upon that. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit more in depth about storytelling and case studies and effective ways in doing so. We're going to be reviewing portfolios that you all have submitted. So, the early career and student community, we have some of those portfolios here today. They're going to be live reviewed. So, we're going to touch upon about 5 to 6 portfolios given the time with our reviewers. So today's panel reviewers include a designer from Rivian, a UX writer from Figma, and a lead product designer from the New York Times. I'll also be adding in my own 2 cents here and there as we move through the work. So let's go. All we're about to get into the portfolios, but before we do, right? And this goes for the reviewers, this goes for everybody at home. Please keep in mind that all the portfolios reviewed today were created by a student or an early career designer who poured time, effort, and love into their work and their portfolio. We ask that you please be kind, respectful, and thoughtful when weighing in during the review and in during the chat. We will be providing a link to each portfolio that we review in the chat so you can follow along while the reviewers are adding in their notes and their voices. Now that we've got that under our belts, let's go ahead and we're going to talk a little bit and review some of the concepts that were highlighted 2 days ago, right? So, on day one, we had a portfolio 101 session. I'm just going to review some of these so you can see what it is that we're going to be talking about. So, a good portfolio usually has good sense of project context. It's going to show iterations, explorations, and trade-off. It's going to highlight the work in that way. You want to make sure that when you are demonstrating your work, you are optimizing for quality over quantity, right? You can have a lot of work, but you want to make sure you are highlighting that exceptional work that you have. You want to focus on the why and the how. It's okay to have some process, but make sure it is relevant and contextual to the work itself. Everything should be easy and to read and navigate. Make sure when you're following it up that there's some degree of lessons or next steps or demonstration of impact of that work. And one thing that's kind of crucial that many folks fail to accurately represent is they're not highlighting their work at the top, at the beginning, right? They're diving right into the process of their work, leaving the actual solutions or the designs that they made way down at the bottom, maybe probably never able to be viewed by the reviewer. And also just think of this hierarchy when considering your portfolio, that you first optimize for clarity, conciseness, keep things very short to the point, easy, readable, make sure it's helpful for the reviewers, and that you are including a bit of your personality. This is something that you want to use sparingly, but we also want to make sure that we're not hiring a robot. We want to make sure that there's thoughts behind that individual. We also interviewed and worked with Haskew, the creator of Cofolios and a previous Instagram designer, and the notes that he made is that you want to make sure you're memorable, that you're showing, not telling, that the work that you're providing is visual, and that when you're looking at the work of others, there's a lot of hard work putting into it. So it's easy to see the swan gliding across the lake, but you don't necessarily see all that paddling that's taking place. So when you're looking at the work of others, also be forgiving of yourself, but then also recognize that to get to that point, it is going to require a lot of iteration and a lot of development. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you all today to our panelists. First off, we have Timmy. Timmy is a designer, illustrator, and maker based in San Francisco, California. At Rivian, he specializes in visual and interactive design for the vehicle with a focus on brand and identity at the EV automaker, the electronic vehicle Rivian. Alex over here, who is, running this whole show behind the scenes, Big fan of Rivian. Chen is a lead product designer at the New York Times, where she designs news storytelling products. Since graduating from Columbia University's graduate program in journalism and having a stint as a sports reporter in Shanghai, that's awesome. She has designed digital and broadcast news products for the news organizations such as NBC News, Ad Age Magazine, and has been recognized with many awards for her design work. She's also an avid runner and is trying to complete all world major marathons. That's amazing. Ryan is a Brooklyn based UX writer at Figma and previously worked at Pinterest, Spotify, and Uber Eats. They're passionate about making things with other people. I think, Ryan, you're at the right place. You know, Figma's all about collaboration. All right. So thank you so much for being here, team. Let's jump right into this FigJam file that we have here. We have some notes, we have some portfolios. Let's dig right into it. So the first person that we're going to be looking at today, we got Stephen Maya in the house. Stephen Maya's, let's take a look at that portfolio. It's going to come on up. And we could see that Stephen is a UX designer, a product designer, currently based in Los Angeles, California, and a visual designer. So without further ado, Timmy, what are your initial thoughts of Stephen's portfolio?
I thought Steven's portfolio was really lovely. It had really nice type pairings. It's like one of my personal things is like I want to make sure the designers that are building these portfolios still have like a basic fundamental of like how they use type, and having it really clean and having it really simple just makes reading it really nice and easy also.
Awesome. Was there a case study in particular that you found worthwhile or that you would like to discuss?
Yeah, I dropped into Flit Invest, that portfolio first, or that case study first.
All right, it's loading up. There we go. We got Flit Invest.
Yeah. Um, should I keep running?
Yeah, just keep going with it.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I was really liking about this portfolio is the amount of imagery and visuals that were being used. I think the structure was really clear in terms of the order of information. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Is there anything else that you'd like to highlight with regards to the structure, the information, the hierarchy, what's kind of like taking place, or is there anything that you might subtract that you feel is maybe like a bit too much?
One of the things I think I really wanted to highlight, if you go to the top, Miggi,
Hmm.
is I'm a huge stickler for kind of leveraging headlines and leveraging titles
Yeah.
in all case studies. So Flit Invest brand oh, let me move some of this Zoom stuff windows away. Uh oh, you have the brand identity one.
Hmm.
You mind swapping over to the product design one?
Sure.
Which I think is a good example, right? Where one Claire is there's two of the same projects, but two different aspects of the project. And one of the things I would really push on is why not try to use headlines or the project titles to kind of add value to what you did for it. So instead of just saying Flit Invest product design, what is a good example of what you tried to redesign for it? So I would say in this case for this product design, I would say Flit Invest redesigning investing for impact, right? That could be a good headline instead um, of just what it is instead of what it is.
So being more specific about the problems that you're solving, maybe
Yep.
something to better gauge what it is that you're doing as opposed to assuming the entire product. So even here there's like highlighting skills, but they're not necessarily saying, what is the core issue and how long does it take till we get to the problem statement. It takes a while to get to that point. So that's a good thing to consider, especially given that like a reviewer might be looking for very specific things. All right, I'm gonna head on over to Rye. Rye, what do you have to say about this, and which aspect of Steven's work would you like to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I thought it was a really strong portfolio. I tend to approach things from like a story perspective, just being a writer. And I think the structure from top to bottom is really clear and smart. Like it's exactly how you would walk through like a PRD or anything, a product requirements doc, or anything that has like multiple steps, like the problem statement, the insights, the solution, etc. So it's really easy to follow. Um, I think that what was missing, and this is super common across portfolios, especially for younger designers. Thank you, Alex. Acronyms, especially for younger designers, is I think like Steven himself gets lost a little bit in this. It's very specific to the project. And there at one point, I think on the page they list the team, like how many people are on the team and all the teammates, which is great. But it does prompt like, okay, there were a ton of designers. Like, what of this did you focus on and contribute to? Not to doubt that, but just in terms of like when I'm reviewing your portfolio, I really want to know what specific skills you brought to the team, where you contributed versus just showing every asset that was produced on the project, because there's a good chance you didn't make all of them. So I think that's the challenge, to remember that your portfolio ultimately is about you. Like it's great to be humble and be like, there was a huge team that worked on this, but make sure to call out what you did so that people, when they view your portfolio, know exactly what skills you have, and what you would bring to their company.
Yeah, I think that that's 100% true. Like interviewing for places and like showing projects that you collaborate with, like on a lot of folks, like it's important because they want to see that you can collaborate and work with others. But it's even more important in terms of how you talk about the work you yourself did, and isolating that and demonstrating that in a meaningful way. All right, cool. So that being said, we're going to move on to our second portfolio that we have today. We have Jade here. And to kick things off with Jade's work, we're going to talk to Chen here from the New York Times. Chen, how's it going?
Good, thanks, Miggi, and thanks everyone for joining. So I really like Jade's portfolio. I feel like if I was a recruiter or hiring manager and I only have 3 minutes to read the portfolio, it's just so clear to me what this person's strength is, and like what are the what projects I can click into, like it's relevant to the role. And as for the case study, I chose this pregnancy redesign. I really like how this candidate, how they put a timeline, role, tools very clearly on top, and then state the problem and outcome. So it's very clear to me that what they did and what problem they are trying to solve here. And I also like that they put the final design showcase on top. So it's like very clear that, okay, this is the outcome. And then I think when you scroll down, there's a before and after, which I really like appreciate. It's just super clear to me that this is how it looks like before, and this is how they did to make it better. I think I looked at a lot of portfolios and a lot of them had a problem, which is like I need to manually to compare the before and after. But in this portfolio, Jade really clearly puts them side by side, and it just saves a lot of time for hiring managers and recruiters. And yeah, I think overall, I just really like the storytelling. I think it's very clear and it's easy to digest, and it's very concise, which is important. I think the notes I wrote is, one thing I want to note is I feel like in general, it's easier to scan text from top to bottom versus left to right, at least to me. And I noticed that in Jade's portfolio, like they put like left to right, and at first it wasn't immediately clear to me that I need to read it left to right, and they are like connected to each other. Mm-hmm. And I also think in the learning session, if they put it in the bullets, like in the end, it might be more clear to the recruiters that, okay, these are the things you learned, just immediately clear. Yeah.
Yeah. So like just having the like concise set of bullets, like in the findings, can get a little bit lost in terms of like what's first, second, third here. The thing that I like here, there's a lot of like work that's like upfront, maybe a little bit more direction on, okay, well, what should I be looking at in every one of these screens here? I do like that there's like a before and after. Those things really absolutely help. So yeah, good call. Next up, let's see, we have Rai. Rai, what do you have to say about Jade?
Yeah, overall, I thought Jade's portfolio is super clean and simple, which I appreciate. I think a lot of the time, people tend to go a little bit too far. Like, if anything, I'd like to see it kind of strip back and focus on the content and the assets themselves versus like really going over the top and trying to show like all of the different things that you can do. So like showing restraint as a designer is like its own skill. And I really appreciated like how clean and easy it was to access the content here. I think overall, like my feedback for Jade was just to lean into some of the other skills that they note on other parts of their website, but like it's not super front and center. I think in the About tab, I know we're straying away from projects, but She mentions that she's a self-taught illustrator. In the fun tab, she has like a whole like list of just like illustrations and drawings and everything that she's done, which like is absolutely a skill that you can bring to a UX design job. Like you can do storyboarding, you can draw mocks. Like there's so many different ways outside of like literally drawing brand illustrations that you can use that skill. And I think at the very bottom in the footer, it mentions that she coded the site herself too. So just like not selling herself short, she has a ton of skills that she can bring that are like unique and not super common for a UX designer. And just making sure that those like come to the surface as well as the work and the case studies.
Well, cool. Is there any particular case study that that you have feedback for, like within like the storytelling aspects?
Yeah, I dug into this one, my healthy pregnancy redesign. Um, I mean, overall, I think this is a great example of like how a case study should be laid out. I think the header in particular, like the second you land on this page, you get pretty much all of the context you need of like, what is this thing? What did she do? And it really like, it gave me enough information to be like, do I want to scroll and keep going? Which it did. I think adding motion like GIFs instead of static imagery is always smart because static images take up a ton of space, and just adding this dynamic element both draws the eye and allows you to pack way more content into like a single frame. I think I saw a question in chat about this. I missed the name, I apologize, but there was a question about like, should I show the final designs at the top of the case study or at the bottom? I think it kind of depends. I think my personal approach is to kind of show like tease what the final design was at the top to be like, here's where I wound up. Now let me take you through the story of like how I got to this point and then show the rest of the assets. I like, you know, you don't want to give away everything at the beginning. You often have a ton of assets too, so you don't want to just like pile it on at the top. But it's useful to provide like what that final design looks like so the viewer has context for what they're reading when you have all of that detail.
It's like a recipe on Pinterest, you know, you want to see the final pie photo. That's the thing I want. And then show me how I make it or how you made it.
Yeah, like the pre-baked turkey. You need to start with something. You got to entice them. It's like those TikToks that like start with the end and then like start back over at the beginning. You have to have a hook. So like consider having and structuring a hook at the beginning, because you have to really remember is that, you know, folks are strapped for time. They're sitting at a cafe, they're reviewing probably like 20 portfolios. And if you save your actual design work to be at the very end, you have to remember they're still evaluating for craft. They're evaluating for storytelling. Think about how many stories actually start, you know, at the end and then start to wind back and then take you through the series of events. So like consider it in that way. And I would agree. What I really like is just that these three projects are very clear. It's very accessible. In the same way, you know, like Rai was saying, is that there was they held back with regards to what they could do. So it's very clear and understanding. I would even say that, you know, like considering what projects you might have, like 6 projects, but considering the role that you're applying for, try to showcase those projects the most. And one little insight that I'm just going to bring up right now that we might actually break later is that across yesterday and today, everybody's looking at the first piece of work. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, all right, let's take a look at that like first piece of work. I think maybe the exception was the most recent one that Timmy says. So remember that, you know, to be impactful, that first piece of work might be the only piece that actually gets reviewed. So if you're thinking about the time, you're putting the time into your case studies, you know, consider, you know, which one are you putting the most time into to make that first impact. All right, so with that, we're going to head on over to Matthew Sang, and we're going to kick it off with Timmy. Timmy, you're muted. No worries.
As usual. I thought Matthew's portfolio was really playful. Like some of the biggest highlights, we'll jump into one of the case studies in a second, is how the storytelling is pretty great on this one. And I find it's like a really great example to riff from. The homepage is a little bit long, and I think it takes a little bit long to get to the projects themselves. And I would kind of maybe reorder that a little bit. Like it's nice to know who you are, but the projects are really key. So if you want to maybe consolidate the hero effect, I think just like how do we consolidate is something that's going to be really important here.
Cool. So
Can
which project would you like to jump into?
can you jump down to the that one, Sydney's Chinatown? Yeah. So this case study was like a wonderful example of like a clear and thoughtful project story. And one of the things that, going back to my headline comment before, like making sure you use headlines, this reads like an article. And you can just get the TLDRs by just hitting all these like bold headlines and capture the story. And this is what's really nice about this portfolio. He sets up the problem really well. He has a lot of they have a lot of process photography and imagery, which I know this is like a branding specific project and maybe we don't have that opportunity all the time, but I really encourage people to try to collect that stuff, whether it's screenshots of like interviews that you do, screenshots, like just having artifacts shows that you're able to show, it's like having that visual process for us. So yeah, like this is one of my favorite sections, which is just little, like I went out and took photos in the city to kind of capture Chinatown, and it just shows us your process, like literally through your lens, like through your eyes. Yeah, the hero of the projects have these like stickers that kind of sorry, I'm making you like scroll back
Oh,
and
no
forth.
worries, no worries. Yeah, they have
They
the
have these
stickers.
like stickers on it, which I was a little confused because I wasn't sure if that was like, part of the project or just like kind of part of the case study or part of the portfolio aesthetic. Um, so I think I would just be mindful of how that gets overlapped on your images a little bit. Because they kind of look like they're really nice and they look like they're part of the design, but they're not.
They're almost like too integrated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and then the one thing is if we go down to the user research section, uh, there's like these flows and these moments are really good. Is there an audience title? I don't remember which order this one is. There's like
Here's the
audiences.
movement flows
Oh,
audience
there
right
we
here.
go.
Yep.
So this audience, the biggest highlight for me is that second paragraph. Like the majority, because of the pandemic, the majority of visitors in Chinatown are now local Sydney residents. That's like a headline to me, right? Like that's a capturing moment. And I think instead of saying audience, we can use that instead.
So really like activating those headlines.
Exactly. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
as
probably
opposed to them being like static. Yeah, I
yeah.
totally feel that. I'm just gonna make a quick comment about the process here, and it's something that I really like. Each section that we have here kind of builds on the previous one. So we start with this headline, and yeah, there's just like a lot of photos and visuals, but they're very directive, and it's enticing. It's like, okay, now I want to know more about the history. Okay, visual research, I'm here for it. And oftentimes we say try not to zoom out of the work too much. Like usually if you have like a bunch of stickies, you don't want to zoom out on the stickies because if you zoom out on the stickies, right, you can't really read the stickies, and then it just looks like, it's like, oh wow, I put a bunch of stickies here in my portfolio, but there's no context. I think that this allows you to, with the photos, right, like this is purposeful when you're zooming out on the photos, because you're getting the amalgamation of those photos, and it's helping paint a picture of the work. So one thing that we kind of talked about yesterday was, like showing the work, make it big and bold, but there's a place and a time for when you kind of take a step back and you actually see the breadth of the work in a way that helps facilitate the narrative, and then now you see a close-up. So I referred to this as the you have an establishing shot where you see everything, then you have like a mid-range shot where you're a little bit more close up, then you have the close-up with the details. And I think that that's something that works here with this research, but also something to think about when you're doing like UX process. So here we are with like that close-up that where it's showing the details, where like mid-range, like here we're zoomed out. And I think that that theme actually helps serve the purpose of the work itself.
Yeah.
Let's see, who else do we have on this one? Reid, do you have anything that you want to discuss with regard to Matthew's work?
Yeah, I mean, big plus one to just how like the entire site and the projects are laid out. I think it's very intuitive. The larger text helps like take up space on page without the content being too heavy, without there being too much to read. If you jump into the Privacy Penguin project, I think it was the first
That's
one
right there.
to
Yeah.
reiterate your point. Also, yeah, meta note really quick. Like we reviewed these over the last like 2 or 3 days. And I came to this site and picked the first project because I like the amount of time that I had to do these things, which is how people are reviewing your portfolio. So like when they have to review 10 portfolios, they're going to squeeze it in whenever they can, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to look through your whole site. So just be smart about what you put first. But overall, yeah, I like this is laid out very similarly to the one that Timmy walked through in terms of like bespoke sections, a very clear order to how they went through things. I think the only thing to look out for, if you scroll up a little bit, there was like a user quote towards the top, I think.
User quote. So right up here.
That guy, yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, just reading it, like depending on the monitor size that you have, I think I was just viewing it on my like MacBook screen. The text is so large and so thick that there's like a line break every like 1 or 2 words. So it's worth when you're playing, especially with type this size or with assets that are particularly large, to just like stretch your window and play with different aspects, check it on mobile to make sure that it still feels like readable and coherent on smaller screens. And there's a good chance that whoever's reviewing your portfolio is like a designer and probably has like a ridiculous monitor, but it's good to play it safe and just make sure that it works across screens. And then I think the only other note I'm looking through, but I think Matthew did a great job here, if you keep scrolling, Miggi, of showing the various iterations of the process, and I think he cuts like iteration 1 through 5, which is honestly wild. You can probably do like 1 or 2. But showing in progress work in general, like low fidelity, like how did you get to this point work is super valuable. I think going back to what Timmy said earlier, like most of the time we want to see how you think, not necessarily what you produced. Because that ultimately is like, that tells us that you can then produce the things that you need to at this new job. It's like, it's hard to look at just a piece of work and be like, how does that apply to how they might work at Figma or at the Times? But if we can see how you think and how you make decisions and how you like started at an idea and got it to a super polished one, it gives us a much better idea of who you are and what you're capable of.
Cool. Awesome. Chen, do you have any thoughts on this portfolio here?
No, I think Timmy and Ryan covered everything. Yeah.
All right, cool. So we're gonna move on to the next one. This should probably be disambiguated letters. I'm not quite sure if that's their L's or I's, but I'll say Ilan Sevic. So let's take a look and let's see. Chen, have you taken a look at this portfolio? I just want to give you the opportunity to like speak up.
No, I haven't yet, but I'm taking a look right now. Yeah.
Haven't yet. Here, how about this? We get some of your first impressions. What are your first impressions when we land in on Ilan Sevic's work?
I think it looks really fun. That's my first impression. Like I immediately can see this person's personality.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I also like how they use the bullets to say like, okay, where they are and they're a student and what their passion is. And it shows that they're creative, and it makes me want to like see more of their projects.
All right, so let's take a look. Let's go look and see more of their projects. All right, so we're welcome. We see design process, philosophy, their tools. How do we get to their work? More about how I work. Okay. All right, we're looking for the work. I believe we're here. Okay, cool. So we have some projects. Which project would you like to take a look at?
The first one.
All right, let's take a look at that first one. Folks, we're just going off of like live reactions here. Really feeling the little bits of personality, the little like, you know, subtle nods to like internet gifs, but you know, the little roses on there. All right, so let's take a look. So here, pick, pair, personalize, or flower your story. All right, let's take a look. What do you think? What are your initial impressions, Chen?
I kind of feel like they could make the work more obvious on the first page, because that's usually what the recruiter or hiring manager is looking for your project. And you maybe make the image a little bit bigger. And right now, it's not really clear to me what this is. What is pick, pair, and personalize your flower, your story. I think maybe like rephrase it to make it more clear what problem you're trying to solve here. What is this product? It's my first impression. And then I like that they stated their role, timeline on top, and background. And if you scroll down.
All right, let's scroll down. We got the overview. We have some discovery here on like the different types of UX research methods that they have. They're discussing their synthesis and their problem statement. How might we better create a flower app that attracts younger generation, best suits their needs.
I like this product problem statement. I think it's like one sentence. It's really clear what problem you're trying to solve. My first impression is there are too many visual noise on this page. Like a lot of icons, which is like very creative, but at the same time, it's really hard to just see the most important part of this project, the problem and what you're trying to solve, because you made problem statement a little bit different than the others, but at the same time, the others are kind of visually interesting too. So it's like maybe differentiate them a little bit more and like add less icons, I think might help.
Yeah, like I agree. This problem statement's great. It's almost like if that problem statement was up here, then we kind of like understand what we're evaluating and like what we're getting into. All right. So they have some research here. They have a competitive analysis. They have their visualization and planning. Any thoughts as we're like just kind of navigating and skimming currently?
I think to me, like I usually like when I see problem, I would immediately want to see how you are solving it. So I would just scroll down and to see like, okay, what's your solution to this problem? Yeah. And like I usually like I like when people lay out the process, so I know that okay, you did user research, you did interviews, but like honestly, like a lot of times because I don't have time to read everything, I would just scroll past it and go to the design to see the solution part. And I think here I'm not seeing really clear to me that like exactly the solution to the problem. So maybe it'll be, oh, maybe this is or just I think it might help it like if they like highlight a feature and just like list clearly, okay, how I'm solving this problem. That might be helpful.
Yeah.
It just feels like I need to read like every detail and try to understand myself.
Yeah, I think you made a really strong point where it's like you want to just get to the work, and then once you've like experienced the work, you want to then go back and then learn the context of it, like or put some of that process in context, because there's a lot of process here where you don't really know where you're going, and we're short on time, so we really need to get a sense of that. Timmy, what were your thoughts?
Definitely really creative, and I think what's nice about it is it kind of communicates the personality of this individual like right off the cuff. You're like, this is a person I'd want to work with, right? But I do agree. I think there's quite a lot of process, which is really nice. Like kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier, like a lot of case studies are about your individual like journey through this project. And as designers, we already kind of know the outline, right? We know we're going to hit on problem, wireframes, mood board, whatever that may be. But what we want to know is like what stood out for you? Special guest Ryan. So yeah. So I
Yeah,
really
I
like the
think
amount of process that's in each of these case studies, but to Chen's point, it is really hard to sift through, and we kind of need the main beats to help us to help you guide us through it as like kind of third party people that weren't part of your process.
Yeah, no, like I 100% agree. Like even being a professor who would assign projects in a linear order, I would then tell my students whenever you're putting together your portfolio, like I'm giving you these methods to help you identify what it is that you want to design, but ultimately just show the things that helped you. Not everything is going to be helpful. Sometimes you're going to perform user research, but if there isn't a connective thread of something that you learned, an insight that ultimately impacts part of your design, it should not be included. You can probably do a multitude of research activities, but if they aren't connected directly to how it is that you're designing things, right? Just leave them off. Everything that should be in here should lead to your ultimate design. And sometimes, when you have a lot of stuff, you know it comes across as saying, wow, I can do all of these things, but really what we need you to do is to curate that work. There's I say that there's like a difference between a long form case study and the work that you show on your portfolio. when you curate that work, when you're very intentional about the things that helped you get to those solutions and you show that solution up front, that's signaling to a reviewer that you know what's important about your project, and this is not just a series of tasks that was given to you by an instructor or as prescribed online, but instead your directives, the things that helped you design something. And then just be upfront. What did you design? What was that clear output? You shouldn't be coy about it. You should never try to say, here's all the stuff, you figure it out. You should say, here are the very specific things that helped me design this solution. Ryan, any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a good example of like all of the content being there, and just needing to edit back. There's like everything that this designer needs in terms of the showing their projects is like on the page, and it's just a case of like trimming down and focus. Um, I think a general principle of UX applies here too. The concept of like a center of gravity. So like on any given scroll on the page, it should be like very clear what your eye should be drawn to. Um, and it does get a little tricky on on some of these scrolls to understand like what is the focus of this, both in terms of content hierarchy, like using like a lot of H1s, but also just in terms of visuals, and not totally understanding like, is the visual the emphasis here? Do I need to look at that in order to understand what the copy is saying? So just making sure like on any given part of your website or portfolio, that when you land on a page or if you're scrolling, it's very obvious like where a user should be scanning or spending their time.
Well, I love that. Just thinking about the center of gravity, like at any point in time, I think that that's like a really good way to just kind of identify that. So as you're moving your way through. All right. So now we are heading on over to Iria. And Chen, I'm actually going to start with you again. Sorry to put you on blast that
Oh, no
last
worries.
time. Just be like, hey, let's look at this portfolio for the first time together, you know.
No, no
But
worries.
I think it was really helpful.
So for area, I'm trying to remember. So I like the intro page. I think it's clear to me that their product designer with their skills is. So as I scroll down, it's a little bit hard for me to understand what each project is because the text disappears as you scroll down. And usually the recruiter, we scroll like really fast, all the hiring managers. And so I need to like stop at some certain point just to read the text. I feel like this is creating some extra task for people. And yeah, and another thing is I noticed that as I click into each project, some of them are the poster design, some of them are print design. So I feel like it'll be helpful if you just put it on the homepage that what this is. So for example, if I'm hiring a UX designer, then maybe I will just looking for the UX design project primarily. Yeah.
Yeah, so just like providing that context just a little bit more. Cool. All right. And anything else to say with regards to the case study itself?
I think the case study, it's very clean. I like that. And I also like the use bullets and it's very clear what the process is. I think I was looking at the second project, maybe go to the second project.
Yeah, go to the second one.
Yeah.
Oops.
Oh.
See if there it is.
Yeah, basically if you scroll down to the problem statement, it's a super long paragraph. And I think I would just make it like, I like the big code here. If it's very like eye-catching and showing me that what is the product this person is designing. And if you just like scroll down. So I think I would just make the problem statement like maybe like more like a bullet. So it's like easy to see that what are the problems here are. Like maybe at the end of this page. Something, yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's so yeah, just being very clear about what it is that you're designing for. I think that there's a ton here. So you can easily get lost. And I think that this person too could just benefit from having that center of gravity, right? It's like let's talk about the one thing that we really kind of dug into here, to make it cool. Anything about this like last little bit here, kind of showcasing the output. They have a little website within a website.
Yeah, I think it's cool. But honestly, at first I thought this, I didn't realize this is a prototype. Maybe because of the background color or something, I immediately thought this is an ad or it's something not related to this project.
I thought it was like the next project, and I was like, oh, it's a prototype. Because I was like, why can't I click this project?
Right. I think that's an important note to make. It's like, don't just drop somebody somewhere unexpected. Make sure you guide them to that destination. All right. Rye, what would you like to say?
I love the idea of monetizing your portfolio and just having ads just in case people like.
Especially if they're going to be on a Figma live stream.
It's smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think like the branding and the aesthetics of this portfolio are very strong. Like it's very clear that this designer has a background in visual design, like immediately. To Chen's point, I think like there's a little bit of over engineering in the interaction on the homepage. In terms of like even you scrolling now, it's kind of hard to get like the title and the subhead like both on the page at the same time. Because they like disappear and get tucked behind the other images. So this might be a case of either tinkering until it's like just right or just dumbing it down a little bit. But the project pages themselves, if y'all in the chat want a good example of like how to lay out a project page, it's pretty spot on. Miggi, if you want to jump to the first project, I believe again.
Oh no, you don't say the first project.
But is that shocking?
Yeah.
The way they've laid out the header, again, like adding these kind of tags to highlight what skills or what this project is even about. Some quick like how long did this take, what tools did I use, and then a quick summary and a kind of a quote to highlight what problem they were trying to solve. I think the critique is that the whole page is very long. There's a lot of content here. But I do think it's laid out pretty well. So like if I wanted to go really, really deep, it would be helpful. And like these user personas, I do like that they use native elements on the page, these like boxes that are baked into the web page versus like images of text, which are really hard to get right and often are like warped or like don't load well or whatever. So it's really, really clean. At the very least, we see their skill and how they created the page. But yeah, I think there's like, we can go real deep on like specific like text and content and stuff. But if anything, just make sure if you have this much content that you have like very clear H1s or spots on the page where someone's scrolling really fast, they know exactly where to stop to get like a TLDR or a summary of whatever content they're looking at.
Yeah, I'm gonna just pull up a point that Timmy was saying earlier too. It's like oftentimes we're gonna have these like generic titles. If you can make that title more actionable, I think it's that much more impactful because okay, cool. Oh, sorry, did not mean to try and print something. So here it says user testing and feedback, and then a photo of somebody using it. Maybe there's like a lesson that you learned, maybe there's something there that's specific to the project that can at least help drive a point to make the person want to read through here, right? Because otherwise the things that are most emphasized, I see user testing and feedback, user experience, community aspect, understanding features, right? I'm not reading or understanding anything that is directly related to the project. So if you're designing something for photographers, just say like, what are you testing for? Testing, X to solve Y. And what about the user experience? So like use straightforward and easy to use, ease of navigation, right? You have to be more specific. Like, what about it? Like they were able to take the photos that they wanted to take, people were able to actually engage and they found the thing that they were trying to do. When you lean in too much into these kind of generalized terms, it starts to mean less. So try to be as specific as you can within this context. Try to be as concise as you can, and I think Rye, as a writer, you can attest to that, right? Maybe no.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Yeah, like just again, people are going to take so little time to look at your portfolio or your resume. Not to be cynical, but just having done this because I'm busy and tired. Like
Yeah.
assume they'll have like 2 or 3 minutes to review and that you need to get them as much information as possible in that time, and adjust accordingly. Like it's great to have all of this detail, but ultimately if people can't get through it, it's kind of lost.
Yeah, we were saying that when you design your portfolio, you got to treat it as a UX problem. We now have a quote to start with that. I'm busy and tired, Rye. Right. So we have that quote that we can now use as part of that project as our user research. But I wanted to print GIFs. That quote is really impactful and it's very specific, and it drives that conversation in a very meaningful way. So think about these things that help drive those conversations in the meaningful ways. Let's do one more here. We got Melissa Kibler. Timmy, have we talked to you in a while? Did you review Melissa?
I did not take a look at this one.
You did not take a look at this one. Let's hit up Chen, and Chen, while we go through it, Timmy, if you want to throw some interjections in here as
Sure.
well, feel free to do so. Let's take a look. All right, Chen, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I can see Melissa's personality directly from this intro page. Like she said, she was a former high school English teacher. Like it was nice to see someone's personality coming out of portfolio. But I would also make this part like a little bit more concise, because like again, like Ryan said before, like usually people don't really have a ton of time, so they will just read the first sentence and move on to the project. So I would just make it more concise. And then I think if you click on the for yourself help app
For
maybe,
yourself, app.
yeah.
I applaud you for not just looking at the first project.
Wow.
No,
All right.
I chose this one because it has app on it, so I know this is a product design. For the first one, I wasn't sure what that was.
All right, that's also a very helpful takeaway. She understood. She looked for that keyword app, and that's what she was evaluating for. So that's where she went, folks. All right, let's talk about this one.
Yeah, I think generally like she like laid out the process very clearly. But my first impression is just visual design wise, I think I would play with the font a little bit, just choose one that's more easier to read. I'm also curious what Timmy and Ryan think. I just think overall they're in her portfolio, it's all very long paragraph and it's a little bit hard to read. I would just make them like bullets and kind of make them more concise, and play around with the visual design a little bit. Also feels a little bit, there's a lot, kind of a lot of visual noise on the page. Yeah.
It's like tension, like the type. It's like kind of very tight at points, and there's like some tension that's kind of created the way that things are aligned. That's kind of what I'm feeling right now. Timmy, what do you feel?
Yeah, I agree. I think to Chen's point, like the sections are very clearly like defined, but it's almost as if each of those sections was just a kind of a stream of consciousness of what the process was. And it's each of these sections, I think, can be its own story, right? Like we can expand on that paragraph and break it up even more. The ideate section has 4 paragraphs. That could maybe be 4 additional kind of little sections that you just pull out and break out from the page. To what you were saying earlier, when we first got to this case study, I was like, what is this about? Because you actually, there's no app until you get kind of like all the way down the page. There's no
All the way right.
final, right? There's like the final isn't at the top, just kind of a photo. And so you don't know what this project is about immediately.
Right. So just being very clear of the objectives. This is an app showcasing that design, bringing it up to the front, chunking out the text, making things like a little bit more readable. Like you're mentioning, like what are the true intentions that are here. All right. So we're coming up close on time. We unfortunately did not have time to get to everyone today. But I would like to ask each one of you. Ooh, Ryan's over here just throwing it in now. I'll focus in on Timmy. We won't put Ryan on blast for that. Timmy, what are your general notes or your parting thoughts, your takeaways for everybody that's here today?
Yeah. This is kind of like a shout out to Chen a little bit, but like case studies should read like an article, like I said earlier, like the headlines are the main beats that we should get through and you should use them to your advantage. Just having design or mood board isn't gonna tell us anything, and you're kind of requiring us to read a little bit more. Which if we really hone in on being a designer and being a creative, it's all about communication. Your case study, your projects, whatever it is, you want to be able to communicate visually or written. And the design process that we have, a lot of these portfolios have like beautiful designs and really good process. That's just the outline. That's just, the problem, the research, that's baseline. I want to know about you. I want to know about the little button issue that you ran into. Like, I want to know what are the hurdles or the little challenges that speak more to what you needed to kind of work through, or that you did differently. And a lot of one of the projects that I'm really proud of that I've done before, it wasn't about the project when I explained it. It was about this one little thing, and then that like bugged me, and then I just expanded on that, and that kind of serendipitously solved the rest. So it's like, I think moments like that are really key.
I love that, the way they said it. It's like, find that one little thing that bugs you, right? Because it's like the design process and like putting in all that research is about finding that thing and then providing a real solution for it. So, it's like, find the thing that entices you most and be specific about it. And that's the work that you do. All right, Chen, what are your parting thoughts?
It kind of similar to Timmy. I think like, because your portfolio really shows your communication skills, and it's one of the very important skills people are looking for when they are hiring designers. So just how to concisely tell the story, tell how you solve the problem, really, it's really important. Also, just I think we mentioned this a lot of times in this hours, that keep in mind that most recruiters and hiring managers and designers for reviewing your portfolio, maybe they only have 2 minutes or 3 minutes to look at your portfolio, and they have like maybe 100 portfolios lined up. And so just really think about, how do you like think about it as elevator pitch. Like, if someone just have 3 minutes, what are they getting out of your portfolio? But maybe also have a way to like have more information if really someone want to read more onto it. And also just show your critical thinking and problem solving skills by really clearly to state the problem and how you solve it, and not try to make people try to find those things. I think that's the key, because if like people spend 5 minutes, they still haven't found how you solve this problem, they will just move on to the next portfolio. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, one thing that I was always told, especially just working on pitches, you were saying elevator pitch. The format is designing X to solve Y for Z, right? So, what is it you're solving? What problem is it you're solving? And for whom are you solving it for? And when you have that like little framework, you kind of evaluate what's like most important and how are you communicating that. And then we're gonna cap it off here with Rise saying more with less. What are your final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, big plus one to everything Timmy and Chen said. I think these are just like the realities of getting hired as a designer. Like, the tactics that you have to take are what they are. But ultimately, like, keeping it simple, I think, is like the biggest one, both in style, like in how your website is designed, but also just in how you present the work, how you speak, like making sure things are short enough to be consumed. Don't overthink it. Like, you don't have to go really out of the box to show every single skill in your portfolio. Like, make sure it is consumable and that you can design something relatively minimal that also communicates all of your ideas. Showing your work is big. Like, we're getting to a point where AI now can produce like beautiful mocks, but ultimately what will set you apart is how you think, and how you solve problems. And ultimately what you're being hired for is to solve problems, not to design specific UI. Like, visual detail can come towards the end of a project, but most of a project is you just thinking through problems. So make sure you show that in each of your case studies. And then finally, make it about you. Like, I think many of us are like introverted and like don't love bragging about ourselves, but ultimately your portfolio is about you. The last thing you want is for a case study to feel so generic and so zoomed out that like someone forgets who even wrote this or who participated in doing it. So make sure just to highlight the work that you personally did on a project, bring it back to what you learned or the skills that you took away. It might not feel natural for everyone, but like ultimately that is what you're trying to communicate, is what you are capable of.
Yeah, yeah. And to add to that, that was like amazing, because you also want to showcase your curiosity, and it's like you were saying, you don't want to necessarily just come across as like a bot. You want to demonstrate what is it that genuinely drives your curiosity, in the same way that Timmy was like, this one thing bugged me, right? It's like, where is your focus? Oftentimes when you include like all that process, it's like, okay, I did all this stuff, but really what mattered to you, what actually helped you, what supported you in designing the thing, made that helpful. All right, so with that, thank you, Timmy. Thank you, Rod. Thank you, Chen, so much for joining us today. This is the final bit of early career week portfolio edition. Thank you all for joining us. And once again, thank you, Reid, Timmy, and Chen, for all of your time, for being here today. I think that there's just so much good discussion to be had, and there's so much more that we could do. But I really think that we were focusing. We gave folks a lot to think about. So once again, thank you so much. All
Thank you.
right.
Thanks, God.
Thank you. All right. So yeah, when you're working on your portfolios, remember it's a lot of hard work, and put that work in, and continue to iterate and grow. Take care and happy designing.